The truth is, a lot of men spend their entire lives competing, without realizing how much it's destroying them from the inside out. Competing for attention, for women, for status, for validation. But there's a reason why older men stopped competing, and that's exactly why their winning is becoming more and more common. And no, it's not about money, looks, or luck. It's something much deeper than that. Because when older men stopped competing, and that's exactly why they're winning, something completely changes in the way the world sees these men. In this video, you're going to understand why older men seem calmer, more respected, and even more attractive without trying so hard. So go ahead and subscribe to the channel right now, because here you'll learn things most men never hear about masculinity, psychology, and modern relationships, and help us hit our goal of 1,000 subscribers. You can be part of this from the very beginning. Topic 1. The day he realized competing was making him weak. There comes a moment in a man's life when he realizes a pretty uncomfortable truth. He spent years competing without even knowing what he was really fighting for. Competing for attention, status, women, respect, validation from other men who were just as lost in the same game. And the craziest part is that the harder he tried to prove his value, the more anxious he became. It was like running on an emotional treadmill that never shut off. Because deep down, constantly trying to impress people always comes with a silent price. A lot of men believe they need to be the funniest guy in the room, the richest guy in the group, the most desired by women, or the most dominant in every conversation. But that pressure creates a tired version of himself. He starts editing his personality just to seem more acceptable, more admired, more competitive. And then something dangerous happens. He no longer knows who he really is. Some guys buy cars they can't afford, hit the gym out of insecurity, and fake a perfect life online, while lying awake at 2 a.m. mentally exhausted. And nobody notices, because men were taught to hide exhaustion behind silence. What's strange is that many men only realize this after 35, 40, even 50 years old. They look back and see how much time they wasted trying to beat other men instead of building inner peace. Some figure it out after a divorce, others after losing money, health, or real friendships. It's almost like life finally tells them, you spent too much time trying to be seen, and not enough time trying to know yourself. And that's exactly when something starts changing inside him. Because once competition loses its shine, a new kind of power quietly starts showing up. Topic 2. Why younger men chase attention, and older men stop caring. When a man is younger, he usually believes attention equals value. The more likes he gets, the more women reply to him, the more people laugh at his jokes, the more important he feels. And honestly, that doesn't make him weak. The truth is, most men were conditioned to believe they need constant recognition to feel relevant, so he enters this invisible race, trying to look interesting, trying to stand out, trying to prove he's winning at life. But there's one thing most guys don't realize. Emotionally starving men always leak anxiety without meaning to. Older men start realizing something that completely changes the game. Most people are too busy trying to impress each other anyway. And once he understands that, something inside him slows down. He no longer feels the need to post everything, explain everything, or convince everyone he's happy. That's why older men often seem more mysterious and even more attractive without trying. They walk into a room without that "please validate me" energy. And ironically, that lack of neediness grabs more attention than desperate attempts to impress ever could. There's a scene that perfectly sums this up. While a younger guy spends the entire night trying to become the center of attention at a bar, the older man is usually sitting calmly, comfortable in his own presence, talking without trying to dominate the room. And people feel that difference immediately. Because emotional calmness has become rare. Nowadays, everybody talks louder, shows off more, and tries way too hard. So when someone shows up who doesn't seem hungry for approval, his presence hits differently. And that's exactly where one of the quietest transformations a man can experience begins. Topic 3. The silent confidence women instantly notice. There's a type of confidence that doesn't make noise. It doesn't need pickup lines, expensive cars, flashy watches, or the need to dominate every conversation. And strangely enough, that's usually the kind of confidence women notice the most. Because after a certain age, many men finally realize real security doesn't come from trying to look superior. It comes from the peace of not needing to prove anything. It's the kind of man who walks into a room and looks comfortable even in silence. And these days, that's become incredibly rare. A lot of younger men think attraction is all about performance. So they try to impress non-stop, talking too much, flexing too much, trying to look overly busy, overly confident, overly desired. But there's a psychological detail most guys miss. Emotionally secure people usually don't feel an urgent need to convince others of their worth. And women pick up on that fast. They notice when a man is trying to sell an image. And they also notice when he's simply living without needing their approval. The difference between those two energies is massive. Maybe that's why so many older men actually become more attractive over time. Not because they became perfect, but because they lost that desperate hunger for validation. They learned to listen more, react less, and observe people better. A man like that doesn't panic when a woman takes longer to text back. He doesn't completely change his personality just to keep someone interested. He doesn't make female attention the center of his existence. And it's exactly that emotional stability that starts creating an almost magnetic presence. A presence that opens the door to something even deeper about modern male behavior. Topic 4. The dangerous trap of male competition. Very few men realize how male competition can turn into an emotional addiction. And the scary part is that it usually starts early. Since childhood, he's taught he needs to be better than other men, stronger, richer, more desired, more respected. So without noticing it, he turns his entire life into a silent competition. His friend's success bothers him. Someone else's relationship becomes a comparison. Even simple moments stop being enjoyed because deep down, he's always measuring who's ahead. And honestly, that kind of pressure drains a man more than he realizes. What's crazy is that many men don't even enjoy the game anymore. But they keep playing anyway. They walk into rooms instantly calculating status, checking who has more money, who gets more female attention, who seems more admired. Social media made it even worse. Today a man wakes up, and before he even drinks coffee, he's already comparing his life to random guys on Instagram. Better car, better body, better vacation. And the result? Constant anxiety that makes him feel like he's never enough. And when someone spends years chasing impossible standards, peace quietly disappears. But older men eventually realize something freeing. Most of these competitions don't actually change anything in real life. At the end of the day, a man can win everybody's attention and still feel empty inside. That's why some men reach a point where they simply stop competing, not because they gave up on life, but because they realized living in constant war destroys the mind. And once that obsession with beating other men starts dying off, space finally opens up for something many men never had before: emotional clarity. Topic 5. He started building a life instead of chasing validation. There's a quiet shift that happens when a man finally gets tired of living just to impress other people. Little by little, he stops wasting energy chasing validation and starts building a life that actually means something to him. And that changes everything. While many men are still desperately trying to look important, he's focused on creating stability, peace of mind, healthy routines, and emotional independence. It's almost like attention stops being the priority, and purpose starts filling that empty space instead. A lot of older men realize true power doesn't come from being admired all the time. It comes from waking up without anxiety, taking care of your body without obsession, making money without needing to flex it, and being able to sit alone without feeling emotionally desperate. Some men start taking morning walks while listening to podcasts instead of spending hours trying to get attention online. Others begin reading books they used to ignore, like The Way of the Superior Man, Meditations by Marcus Aurelius, or Atomic Habits. Small changes like that seem simple, but over time, they completely reorganize a man's mind. And the most interesting part is that the less he tries to prove his worth, the more solid he becomes. Because now his decisions aren't driven by fear of losing approval. They come from awareness. He starts choosing friendships, relationships, and even environments more carefully. He no longer feels the need to be everywhere or please everyone. And that shift creates something extremely rare nowadays: real presence. But there's something even more interesting about all this. Men who find that calmness start affecting people around them without even realizing it. Topic 6. Why calm men intimidate without trying. There's something almost unsettling about the presence of a calm man. Not the insecure silence of someone afraid to speak, but the calmness of someone who doesn't feel the need to react to everything. And the funny thing is, people instantly interpret that as power. Because today the world is full of impulsive, emotional men desperate for attention. Somebody raises their voice, throws an insult, or disagrees, and suddenly it turns into an ego battle. But emotionally strong men usually don't play that game. They understand that losing control is often the real defeat. Maybe that's why some older men seem intimidating without doing anything at all. They don't try to dominate the room. They don't interrupt everybody. They don't need to prove they're the smartest person there. There's a quiet confidence in the way they observe before speaking. And people feel it, because most are used to men who talk too much when they're insecure. A calm man gives off this strange feeling of emotional stability. It's like he's silently saying, "I don't need to beat you to feel strong." And honestly, that energy hits way harder than aggression ever could. In real life, this changes even the smallest situations. When someone provokes an emotionally immature man, he reacts instantly, argues back, raises his voice, or tries to win the interaction. But the calm man chooses when something is even worth responding to. Sometimes he just smiles, changes the subject, or walks away without needing to prove anything. And no, that's not weakness. That's control. And emotional control has become one of the rarest traits in modern masculinity. The problem is, once a man starts mastering that, people around him begin treating him completely differently, especially women. Topic 7. Women feel the difference immediately. Women can notice certain things before a man even opens his mouth. Sounds exaggerated, but it's true. They notice when a man is trying way too hard to impress, constantly seeking approval, or shaping his personality just to seem desirable. And the problem is, many men do this without realizing it. They change the way they talk, fake confidence, agree with everything, and enter this weird performance mode. But there's a huge difference between a genuinely kind man and a man who's emotionally desperate for validation, and that difference almost always shows up in the details. Emotionally dependent men usually live in a constant state of alertness. If a woman takes too long to reply, he gets anxious. If she seems distant, he starts trying twice as hard. If he feels rejected, he immediately scrambles to regain her attention. It's like his self-worth depends entirely on her reaction. But emotionally grounded men give off a completely different energy. They show interest without losing themselves. They don't beg for attention. They don't try to buy affection through over-efforting. And most importantly, they don't put women on an emotional pedestal. That creates a much stronger sense of security and maturity. What's interesting is that many men believe attraction comes from constantly trying to please women. But in reality, women are often more attracted to men who already seem emotionally complete without them. A man like that talks with ease, keeps boundaries, knows how to be alone, and doesn't turn rejection into a personal tragedy. And there's something deeply magnetic about that, because once a man stops acting like someone who needs to be chosen, people start seeing him in a completely different way. And that transformation reveals one final truth: most men learn way too late. Topic 8. The real reason he's winning now. At the end of the day, many older men start winning when they finally understand one simple thing. Life becomes a whole lot lighter once a man stops trying to be enough for everybody. For years, he believed he needed constant approval to have value. He needed to impress women, compete with other men, prove success non-stop. But after enough frustrations, losses, and disappointments, something changes. He realizes the endless chase for validation never ends. There will always be somebody richer, younger, better looking, or more admired. And living trapped inside that mindset becomes a silent prison. So little by little, he starts letting go of certain needs. He no longer feels the urge to respond to every provocation. He doesn't need to show off every achievement. He stops competing for female attention. And maybe the biggest shift of all is this. He stops building an image and finally starts building himself. That's when his entire energy changes. Because men who aren't starving for approval tend to radiate something rare these days: authenticity. And people feel that almost instantly. Not because he's trying to look strong, but because he's finally comfortable being himself. What's fascinating is that many men spend their entire lives believing winning means dominating other people. But mature men discover that real victory almost never happens externally. It happens when a man learns to control his own mind, emotions, and need for validation. And ironically, that's exactly when he starts receiving more respect, more peace, and even more attraction than before. Because once a man stops chasing desperately, he finally becomes someone difficult to ignore. Conclusion. At the end of the day, maybe the biggest trap in a man's life is spending years trying to beat people who were never really thinking about him in the first place. A lot of men grow older feeling exhausted, anxious, and empty because they never learned how to step out of this invisible competition. So here's the question: how many decisions in his life were actually his own choices? And how many were just attempts to impress somebody else? How many times did he sacrifice peace, authenticity, and even happiness just to seem good enough for other people? Because the man who learns to stop competing discovers something powerful. Real strength was never about proving your worth. It was about learning how to live without depending on anyone's approval. And maybe that's exactly what so many men are missing today. So comment below. When did you realize you were competing too much? And which part of this video hit you the hardest? If this video helped you in any way, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications, because here we talk about masculinity, psychology, relationships, and personal growth in a real, deep, unfiltered way. And of course, help us reach our goal of 1,000 subscribers. This might be the beginning of a much bigger transformation than you realize.